All right, well, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this Thursday afternoon for yet another Test.io webinar. Today's webinar is going to be a little bit different for us in that, we're very used to speaking to directors of quality and QA managers and testing professionals. But we've been seeing a trend where we've been having CFOs come to the table, CEOs come to the table, controllers come to the table. And so our goal with this webinar and this webinar series is to look at quality through the eyes of the business. So quality engineering for MBAs. So we're really going to be focusing on sort of the economics of quality, how quality can help drive the bottom line, how investing in quality can generate greater revenue, and how adopting innovative approaches to quality engineering and testing solutions can drive greater profitability. Goal isn't just to speak to CFOs and the like, but we also want to help the directors of quality who are looking for the tools to be able to have these conversations, to communicate the value that their work brings to the business, they and their teams. We want to make sure that we're helping them get those tools too. So today with us is Peter Feldhazy Jr., who's coming off of Star East, where he was a featured speaker. He'll be guiding us through quality economics, quality engineering for MBAs. So over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Ted. Yes, so I'm Peter Feldhazy Jr., and I've been with EPAM for almost 11 years now. And I started back in Hungary and moved over to the US a little over 4 years now. And so in my first 8 years with the company, I worked as a test automation engineer. And last 3 years, I've been working as a consultant, hence a quality architect. And so EPAM is a company that has more than 60,000 employees. We are providing outsourcing and business and technology consulting to our clients, and on a variety of languages, platforms, and domains. And Test.io is part of EPAM that was acquired 4 years ago, so around the time when I moved to the US. And so it's a brand for CRUD testing, localization, CRUD development, and accelerated test automations. That's what Test.io offers. But let me shift over to the topic itself. So Ted already gave a summary of what I'm going to be talking about. And so my goal, of course, is to have people who are more from the business side to understand why quality is important and how it can help their products to succeed better, and also help people who are on the quality engineering side understand how they can emphasize the need for quality better and what are the tools to achieve higher quality while still making sure that the costs aren't going too crazy. Okay, so let me get started. And first, let me give some credits to Gergely Orosz, another Hungarian, who I've been following on Twitter in the last couple of years. So because I switched over from engineering to a consulting role, I realized that I need to learn more about the market itself, the IT market and domain markets as well. So Gergely was trying to find a way of understanding why the layoffs are happening and why companies are started to do hiring freezes. And so the whole thing really started in the pandemic. So what happened in the pandemic? At first, people were a little bit frightened that they would lose their jobs. Companies were also worried that there would be a huge recession. So some of them decided to lay off people right away in the first couple of months. Other companies decided to just wait and see what's going to happen. And what happened was that there was a big boom in digital. So companies went all digital. non-tech companies realized that they needed to either create their own digital platforms and digital departments, or improving and increasing the current ones. Uh, because there were a lot of companies who didn't hire during the first couple of months or first 6 months. There was a pent up demand for engineering work. So that, along with the remote work capabilities, allowed companies to hire more people very quickly. But it also allowed people to ask for more. So what happened? First of all, there were more juniors available than ever before, because many people realized that they don't want to lose their jobs again. So they wanted to find a type of job that they can do from home. And IT, like most of the IT work, is like that. So there were a lot of new junior developers, junior testers, and so on. So because of that, it was easier to hire newcomers cheaply, but it was getting more and more difficult to hire more senior people because they realized that they can ask for more. Let's say you live in the Midwest and you work for a company that's in California. Yeah. Now you can ask for a salary that's a Californian salary instead of Midwest salary. Or to give an example from Europe, let's say you reside in Hungary and you start working for a company that resides in the Netherlands or UK or Germany. Now you can ask for a salary that's from those countries instead of asking for Hungarian foreign salary, which is also like much lower salary in Hungary. So what happened is that many companies hired 2 or 3 times more people than they needed. The costs went up, and they realized last year that they need to reorganize and they need to address the issues that started popping up because of this strategy that they were following in 2021. So there were a lot of layoffs in tech last year, 164,000, which is huge. But we were expecting that it would be a little bit less this year, but already in the first 4 months, there were more layoffs, 168,000. And already in May, by the way, the first week, the layoffs are in the 10,000s. So although we were expecting that the layoffs would slow down, it's actually not slowing down just yet. So there was no optimistic view in the beginning of 2023. Okay, maybe in the first quarter, first 2 quarters, things are going to be slower, and by the time we reach the middle of the year, things would speed up. And actually, from some perspectives, it's getting better, but it's still not there. That what we were expecting. So right now, what we see that layoffs are still going to be ongoing. Hiring freezes are definitely going to be intact, and the companies are still reorganizing. They still are trying to figure out what they want to do exactly, how many people do they need for that, and people with like what level of seniority, first of all, and what knowledge and what experience. So what are the tools and set of tools that they need for achieving their goals? And because of that, many companies are now looking for rock stars, or otherwise called 10x engineers, that are capable of carrying out the same amount of work and even better quality of work as 5 or 10 or more engineers, which is a good idea to hire such people, but it's very difficult to find such people. Most of the time, they are contractors or can be found through outsourcing companies, which is not necessarily a bad thing in times of recessions, but it's again not necessarily an easy job to do, to find such people. Okay, so a company that like one of the biggest IT tech companies is Apple, and it's basically only big tech company right now that is not laying off people. So how did they achieve it? There are a number of reasons, and I would like to just highlight one which really resonates with the message of this presentation, and that's testing. Proper testing practices, a good amount of test cases, and following a shift left approach. So shift left approach means that you try to test as early in the life cycle as possible, already with unit tests, component tests, and integration tests, and not just API tests with real data and real services, and especially not necessarily just UI testing, which come a little bit later in the life cycle and are typically more expensive to test. So as you can see, Noel Swift mentioned that she had been doing more testing at Apple, at EPAM, at Apple than in her previous 6 companies combined. So I think that's telling. Okay, going on with the quality gas pillar, we have quite many examples in EPAM how we were able to help our clients. And one of the examples, there was a company who decided to stop with the QA in 2018. They decided that, okay, all the developers are going to be responsible for testing. They are not going to have QA subject matter experts. And what happened that 2 years later, they approached EPAM to ask us to help solve their problems, but because they started seeing that there are more defects in production now, way more, and with higher severity, so quite many critical issues popping up in production. So what we did was first assessing a couple teams, and we saw that obviously the focus was more on unit testing, which is like it's good that there were unit tests and quite many. Not all of them were necessarily meaningful unit tests, so they could have been improved. That's something that we observed. But we also observed that there were not really any kind of testing above that. And if there was anything, then that was on UI level and not necessarily in a proper way. So what we offered was doing a quick rapid assessments for roughly 30 teams. And what happened was while we were assessing those teams, and these are like rapid assessments that last for 2 weeks, and then we did an enablement program to teach the developers on how to do component testing, how to do integration testing with contract testing, and so on. What happened? First, there was an increase in production defects that were found because many of the defects were still not found until we were brought in. And so they were identified, and the team started working on those issues. And eventually, what happened, the teams that were enabled, they were able to find the issues before even going to pre-production environments. Not even production, but even before pre-production environments, because they were able to find those issues earlier with unit tests, component tests, and contract tests. Okay, so that's basically the shift left that really brought the capability of preventing defects, uh, which is I think very crucial in case you want to increase the quality. But this is not enough. You still need to find the defects while you are doing a continuous improvement of your development work and testing work. So you need people who are carrying out testing in pre-production environments or even in production itself. I will give you some examples later on how you can achieve that. Okay, but first, let me give you a very interesting market example. And I really like this story because first of all, this is from Hungary, and second, I like food. So the example is going to be with food, and I hope those who had their lunch recently or dinner recently are not going to be too hungry. So I definitely don't want to torture you with food pictures. Anyway. So what happened was last time when the recession happened at the end of 2007, it really hit Hungary mostly in 2009, and that's what you can see here on this diagram. So uh, what people decided to do is spend less money on quality products, and my analogy is on food. So they started buying either cheaper ingredients to cook at home, or if they went to a restaurant or to buffet, they bought cheaper food. And what happened eventually, first of all, like they didn't, like obviously people weren't too satisfied because they like to eat good food. So they had to drop that. So they weren't that satisfied. Second, there were health consequences that were quite imminent very quickly. So in about 2 years, from starting from 2011, and I did say that I'm not going to torture you with food pictures, so this is going to be the only one, I promise. So in about 2011, and after that, the gourmet scene was born in Budapest, in the capital of Hungary, and street kitchens, street food trucks, craft burgers, craft beers, and so on started to pop up. And there were food festivals, and more often every year, beer festivals as well. And a lot of people were attending those events and spending a lot of money on food, good quality food. And the demand for higher quality food and higher quality products increased only just 2 or 3 years after everything went down. So, and I went to the wrong direction. So um, then the pandemic happened in 2020. So how did the market respond? Again, immediately, a lot of people decided to cut back on their costs, of course, because either they were laid off or because they were worried that they wouldn't have an income. And so there are two stories, like two sub stories to that. First, the people who were still able to work from home didn't want to give up on the quality of food. So, for example, they started making their own bread using sourdough and keeping with the high quality, but able to cut on the costs. um, the people who had to cut on the costs eventually, like after 2 or 3 months, once they felt that okay, they are in a stable situation, they immediately went back to higher quality food. And one of the like enablers for that was food delivery and street kitchens delivering their high quality products through such services. So for that, grocery stores and restaurants and buffets had to respond. So they started making high quality food. And what happened, those businesses that decided to up their game, up their quality, were able to persuade a lot of people to come back to them. Those who did not respond quickly either disappeared or shrank. Or shrunk. Okay. Um, Last year, the forint was struggling quite a lot. So at the beginning of the year, $1 was 310 Hungarian forints. And later on, it went up all the way to 450, which is like a record, a historical record, and a 50% increase. Or from the forint's point of view, that's more like a decrease. Uh, and yet, people still kept buying good quality food. They still kept going to these food festivals and high-end restaurants. So basically, what I'm seeing from this and what we are seeing is that people don't want to give up on quality. And basically, during the times of recessions, the winners are the people or the companies who keep up with their quality and are able to find ways to still lower their costs, or at least making sure that their costs are not going to increase. So let me give you some examples or like some ideas how you can achieve that. And the first one that I would mention is alternative delivery models. So there are traditional models when you have testers or people with quality assurance background in your team or teams, and they are there all the time, 160 hours a month, and that's basically the traditional model of having people sit there all the time. There are alternative models that you can leverage for flexing up and flexing down the efforts that you require, depending on your demands. That's the first aspect. Second, I already mentioned the shift left and test right approach that we are following at EPAM. So moving the testing closer to development so that you can find issues much earlier, and fixing those issues is much cheaper because the developer can fix it right away before moving on to developing another story. And the test right is when there are end users who validate those tests that you have, and also carry out exploratory testing and provide you a very valuable feedback on your product with an end user's mindset. So again, that's very important to have. Otherwise, you don't know whether you are producing the product that people want to use. Automation solutions. So there are a number of accelerators, not just at EPAM, but like open source tools as well that you can leverage for accelerating your automation needs, not just test automation, but test data management, test reporting, or CI/CD tools. And this is important because you can easily save a couple of weeks or a couple of months of work by leveraging such accelerators per technology. So that's a good way to cut back on costs. And most of the time, these are open source tools and free to use. DevOps. This is probably a little bit a more difficult topic because for nurturing a DevOps culture, you have to change the culture of the company. So that takes a lot of investments initially, but in the long run, it gives back much more because then you are going to be able to roll out or roll back products much quicker and with a higher assurance that you're going to provide a product for your end users that they are looking for. Okay, and so Test.io has already had two master classes before, and one of them was 2 months ago, provided by Lisa Tsunon, and she was there on the Star List last week as well. And so she talked about the confidence from quality, and I think what really again resonates with like the current market situation is that you need to provide services or products that are easy to use, that are stable, well documented, and of course there aren't not too many issues, and hopefully none at all, or just minor issues, and there are updates all the time. And she also highlighted that what drives consumers' needs and like what makes sure that your consumers are going to stay with you and going to use your products is primarily higher quality. So that's the biggest factor, and a strong sense of community. Again, if you know what you're building and the product that you're building is the product that your end users want to use, you get a feedback from the community whether that's the product that they want. Then you don't just adhere to the business requirements, but also to the user requirements as well. Another topic in this series of master classes from Tariq King, who is also an EPAMer just like me, and was also on the series last week. So he talked about force multipliers. And uh, from the economics of quality point of view, I wanted to highlight these force multipliers, the tools and technology, the people, the processes and methods. There were a number of other force multipliers that he mentioned, so I really recommend watching the recording of that presentation. But let me just go through these one by one. So the tools and technology, as I mentioned, there are accelerators uh, that you should be leveraging, test automation frameworks or test automation tools, AI-powered tools, reporting tools, and so on, that can allow you to address needs for during the software development that you can address much quicker this way and in a much cheaper way. People, as I already mentioned before, having those rock stars in your teams help you to helps you to deliver faster with a higher certainty because they know how to produce software or they know how to test software. And these people are going to be able to help your people to learn. They're going to enable your people to grow. So if you have a couple of these 10x engineers, they are going to help your whole team grow. So they are force multipliers. And processes and methods, as I mentioned, shift left, test right, and DevOps engineering. And yep, so I already basically went ahead a little bit and I already talked about the people and processes and tools and technologies. Okay, so before I really dig deeper to this slide, so I'm going to, in the next couple of slides, I'm going to give you some ideas on the different delivery models for testing and also accelerators and other aspects that can help you achieve higher quality while still keeping the costs the same or maybe even decrease them. So the first one that I'm going to show is testing as a service, and this is an example from EPAM, like how we do it. There are four aspects that we highlight here, and it's basically a core flex model. So let's say that there are a number of teams that we need to have with testing services. So they don't have testers. How would we tackle that? So we would have a test manager, maybe also a quality architect sitting in the team as a core core group, either with full capacity or half capacity or however many efforts are needed per month. And so again, it's flexible, kind of, but those people are always going to be there to make sure the delivery is correct and it's smooth. And there's a flexible team. And let's say that at the beginning, for test automation, you need 3 test automation engineers to be able to build the framework itself, or the modules that can be reused in other teams as well, the reporting, adding the reporting capabilities, the browser and cross-device testing capabilities as well, and so on. Obviously, the initial costs are going to be higher. So in a traditional model, what you would do, you would hire 3 test automation engineers and they would be there for the whole time, right? Now, in a flexible model, you hire those 3 test automation engineers as flexible human resources, and you would keep them for the first maybe 2 or 3 months. And after that, you flex down to 2 or 1 test automation engineers, depending on how much efforts you need. And you can flex down and flex up at any time you want. And basically what happens is that once the framework itself is built and it's stable, then you decrease. And if you see that, okay, the test cases are mostly implemented and most of them just need to be maintained, and Lean Sprint test automation can be covered by 2 or 1 engineers, you would just go down. Or you could like have 1.5 engineers of work done, because it's a flexible model. It's not a person necessarily sitting in your team. It's efforts that are done by a flexible team. Okay, so I already mentioned the software, so the accelerators. I'm going to go into details with that a little bit later. And I already mentioned the cross-browser solutions from partnerships, and MobiTrue is a good example for mobile cloud testing solutions. If you need hundreds of different or dozens of different devices for mobile testing. Okay, so that was the first model, a core flex model, or testing as a service. The second flexible model is the aforementioned CRUD testing. And basically, what it provides is a vetted CRUD that has an NDA with EPAM and can have an NDA with the client. So if you are able to get a hold of such services, what happens is that you have people who are knowledgeable in testing. Some of them are rock stars, and they are doing it as a kind of like as a second job. Whenever they want to do some additional testing, they can just hop into Test.io, CRUD, and help out. And what happens is that, okay, so there are two aspects here. One is, let's say that you have regression testing coming up, and it takes 5 days for your team to deliver the regression testing results, to carry out the whole testing. And obviously, that's 5 days. That's a long time, especially nowadays. It's considered a pretty slow regression testing, but that's something that I'm hearing. And in some companies, I'm hearing that it's even more than 5 days. So what you would do, or what you could do, is still leverage your team to do some of that testing, but bring in, let's say, 25 or 50 people from the crowd and go through all the test cases and do additional exploratory testing and provide an end user feedback. Now, what happens is you are going to be able to cut back the regression testing time to within a day. You can have feedback from all around the world, from different locations, with different devices or browser or operating system combinations. And you wouldn't just do the regression testing. You would have additional testing done, being able to find edge cases. And that's basically the power of combining your testing team's efforts with crowd testers. Okay, accelerators. Again, I'm giving you an EPAM example. EPAM is not the only one providing accelerators, such tools. There are many other really great tools. Of course, as I'm an EPAMer, I'm more aware of these ones, and I'm more familiar with these tools, so I can give you some examples of what they are doing. And basically, there are 4 groups that are mentioned here. So there are tools that you can leverage for testing governments, such as Report Portal, which is a very, very popular tool, and even our competitors are not just using it in their projects, but they are contributing to Report Portal. Again, this is an open source solution, and it helps with automated reports, and there's AI behind it, and it's able to determine, like, if you run a test automation suite and some of the tests fail, you can determine whether they are flaky tests or whether there are a group of tests that fail for the same reason, and whether that's a product issue or whether that's a test case issue or a test setup issue. So it's pretty neat. Then there are platforms, the aforementioned MobiTrue, for example, for mobile device and mobile cloud testing. Hillenium, which can have finding issues in the DOM, if in case, well, not issues in the DOM, but if let's say, a web page structure changed and your test cases are going to fail because of that, it can heal the test cases. So instead of putting in a lot of efforts in maintaining your automated test cases, you can just leverage such a self-healing tool, and it's still going to work. Okay, so I can really recommend making a research on what tools are there, and especially like if you are in quality engineering. Obviously, someone who is a CFO or MBA wouldn't do shouldn't do that work, but someone who is a test automation engineer or test automation architect should really dig deep and make a research on what tools are available, or you can visit our site and see what we can offer. Okay, and an example on cost comparisons. Now, these numbers are on purpose not real numbers. They are not dollar, euro, or Hungarian forint currencies. They are just numbers for being able to make some comparisons. Okay, so I'm comparing the traditional model to flexible model and to the crowd testing model, which is also a flexible model. So what you can see in this diagram is if you go with a traditional model in the same location, it's very important that this is in the same location with a low cost or a high cost vendor. This is going to be the difference between the resourcing between a low cost and high cost. So what happens, you can either decide to go with a low cost because you want to obviously decrease in the costs. What happens is that you might not have rock stars there, and ultimately you are going to pay more because just like the example in Budapest with the gourmet scene, what happens that people want better software, they want to use better products. So if you pay less for worse services, what's going to happen eventually? Your products are not going to be the same as if you paid more. Uh, that's what we are seeing. But that's just one comparison. The other one is I already mentioned the flexible model. Now here you can see it's much higher. So first you might think that okay, it's not necessary for you. But what happens with a flexible model, you have the flexibility to flex up and flex down. So if you need more engineering work, not necessarily more engineers, but more engineering work, then you would pay a little bit more at the beginning, but eventually you are able to go down to the same level as the low cost. Now the difference is that you're paying for better engineers that are either rock stars or enabled by rock stars who are, because this is a big pool of testers or test automation engineers. So they are going to be able to provide better quality work. And also, if you want to switch the locations, you have the flexibility there. If you want to switch if you want to switch languages, I think that there's a higher flexibility with this model. Okay, and then the crowd testing, I purposefully had it separate because I think you cannot compare it in a traditional way, because crowd testing is something that you could use for regular delivery as well, but typically it's used for campaigns, or let's say that you have a regression test coming up, or there's a product that has never been pushed to production before, but you want to have a certainty before the first release, and you need to do exploratory testing, then a crowd can uh, do that for you. So that's typically cheaper than paying for a full-time low-cost services, and you can have 25 to 50 testers for a 24 hours period. So it's a quick achievement. It's not a 1 month of work; it's a 1 day work of equivalent, and it's easily equivalent of more than a month of work because you get 25 to 50 testers. Another thing with these flexible models, the testing as a service and the crowd testing, is that you're not paying for slack, you're paying for actual work. Because when you are paying for these traditional models, what happens? You're paying for 160 hours of work. People who sit there, they work 8 hours a day. But out of those 8 hours, some of that is lunch, some of that is coffee or tea break, or if they want to slack because they are tired. So typically that's more like 4 or 6 hours of work a day. With flexible models, you're not paying for engineers, you're paying for engineering time. So if you are paying for 160 hours, that's an actual 160 hours compared to when you're paying 160 hours of work here, you're actually paying for 160 hours of time for someone, and maybe the engineering work is going to be somewhere between 80 and 120. Okay, so this is basically like how these models compare to each other. Let me give you some case studies, like how these were able to help some of our clients. I think one of the biggest examples here is, and it's a very quick result. There was a fashion company for which we were able to save more than $11 million, and that's on RMAs. So what happened? People were sending back devices, and these were expensive devices. So even a couple hundreds of devices being returned, that's a loss on revenue. And also all the costs of shipping, fixing or refurbishing those devices, maintaining a support team who is able to communicate with the end users is very costly. Now, what happened? We at EPAM were able to figure out a way how to improve the communication between that company and its end users through end user testing, and also with processes, better testing processes, and overall better software engineering processes. And in the end, what happened? There weren't so the devices weren't shipped back anymore. So basically, within just a short time, more than 2,000 devices that would potentially would have been shipped back weren't shipped back anymore. Or another great example, and this is what you can see on this image below. End users received this device over here, this prototype, and within 5 months, there were 8 campaigns, 8 releases and testing campaigns for these releases. And within these 8 releases, more than 2,000 unique defects were found. And what's very important, we only pay for found defects. So people who are part of our vetted crowd are very motivated for finding real defects and not just testing, but to find defects. And many of these are critical defects. Some more test cases, case studies, not test cases, case studies from our testing practices. So it's not just the crowd testing that I wanted to bring here, like how you can save money, but it's also, first example, the shift left, and that's per year based, almost $1 million were saved for one of our clients due to approaching or due to applying shift left principles, and the release cycle went down from 1 month to a week, which is I think a really huge achievement, and that's ultimately because of shift left testing. Or next example, which is $500,000 every year after applying assessment recommendations. Typically, a full-fledged assessment is somewhere around 6, sometimes 8 weeks, and what we do is we try to dig deep. So trying to find the reasons of why there are issues, why there are defects leaking to production, why there's a lower velocity of development teams. And just by applying the recommendations provided, it's $500,000 a year. So I think that's a pretty good cut on costs. Okay, so yeah, there are the additional other case studies that you can read here. And let me just finish it because I think I've been talking for quite a while now. And I hope that the message went through that high quality is still important even during a recession. And that's basically the only way to really retain your current customer base, or maybe be able to increase it, especially if your competitors are not caring about quality. And there are a number of ways how you can achieve that. One of them is leveraging flexible models. This way you can keep the same quality or even increase it with less costs. Shift left helps with preventing defects, but especially when you start doing like following shift left approaches, you still need to find those defects. So sometimes having a crowd helping in that is really helpful. And use accelerators. There are a number of open source tools. They are free. They are amazing. There's a community behind it, so they are being updated all the time, and they can answer your questions. So use those testing accelerators or other accelerators because they are going to help cut the costs once again. Okay, so I would like to thank you for listening to my presentation, and I really hope that there were a couple useful ideas that you will be able to take home, even if you are sitting home, still being able to take it home. And yep, just uh, let me know what questions you may have. I'm very happy to answer them.
That was fantastic, Peter. Thank you so much for doing this. Definitely one question, I want to start with or offer up is something a concern we often hear where when we're speaking to sort of internal quality teams, there can be concern that working with an external quality engineering vendor, working with crowd testing, creates a sort of competitive atmosphere with internal teams, where we like to try to show that it's more of a complementary, it's more of an extension of an internal team. Could you speak to that, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I really like this question because, like last week on the Star List, I had a tutorial on how to become the quality consultant of your company, and there I was addressing actually this question because many times when a consultant joins for a couple weeks or months, that's exactly the reaction that I'm expecting. That not from everyone, but quite many people that they are worried that I'm there to auditing them. I'm not there to audit them. I'm there to assess the current situation. And my goal is not to get them fired. My goal is to have them succeed. Because the only way I can succeed is if they succeed. That's basically like the return on investment for me. If I'm putting in several weeks of time, I want to see them thrive. I want to make sure that they are able to improve on what was lacking before. So I will try to identify together with them, involving them, the pain points and see how they can address those issues and enable them to do it. So I'm not the one who is going to fix those issues for them. They are going to fix those for themselves. And because of that, they are going to strengthen their own positions. That's one part. That's the assessing part. The other part, the crowd testing or bringing in people, again, it's a complementary work. So if you are a tester or you are part of a testing team, the goal is not to get rid of you. The goal is to help you because, again, circling back to that example, if you and your team are working on regression testing for 5 days, and let's say that you have to do it every month, now it's very exhausting and it gets boring after a couple of cycles. That's not the most exciting part of testing. And like, do you want to continue doing it that way, or would you be happy if you could decrease it to just only 1 day, and instead of you carrying out all the testing activities, there are other people who are doing it for you, and instead you are doing more of an analysis work, you are doing a design work, and you are doing more of coordination work. That's more exciting, and that's what crowd testing can help with. So yeah, basically these are my answers.
Oh, great, thank you. Yeah, so again, the floor is kind of open. I know we've only got a few minutes left. Give it maybe another minute or so if anybody has any last few questions for Peter. Otherwise, thank you all very much for joining us this afternoon. We'll be posting the recording probably early next week, and I'll send out a link to it.
Uh, Peter, I have another question. Peter, this is Siva. I think I met you last week in the Star East.
Oh, yeah. Hi.
Yeah. So,
Nice to
uh,
meet you
yeah. So
again.
quick thing. So the regression suite, when they're actually moving towards the shift left approach, uh, they're going to have more like a API test and then exploratory and then UI test going to be getting created. So it's not going to be one-on-one, right? Like the regression suite is like around 500 test cases. So it's not going to be a one-on-one. Then you translate that to automation to words. So what would be your, I heard the C Lights is having a coverage that you can actually get the report from code coverage and the test coverage together, but that seems pretty expensive. But how do you ensure all these test cases are actually layered in multiple levels to get the traceability from conversion from right to left?
Okay, for that, let me just go back to yeah to this slide. It's a little bit smaller, so I
Mhm.
hope it's still visible.
Yeah, yeah,
Now, yeah. So basically, the goal is with the shift left, and as you mentioned, like if you let's say if already and the 500 test cases, are those all UI test cases that you're referring
yeah.
to, or Mhm. Okay?
Like
So after
it's both like a I would call like integration end to end everything, but there is no package as such like, oh, this is the regression suite that we have and then it's a legacy one or something they are translating, but the functionality is still going to be intact
Mhm.
with the new product that is going to be evolving. So then how do you actually convert this and then gain that confidence?
I see what you mean. Yeah. So okay. So basically, if you already have those 500 test cases,
Uh-huh.
then first of all, you probably are kind of attached to it because you and your team probably put in a lot of work into it. And if you see the value in it,
Yeah.
obviously you want to keep it. Yeah. So if you see it, you should definitely keep it. You can still improve, let's say, if you are right now seeing that it takes a lot of time to execute them. Obviously you wouldn't have it executed every time there's a new build.
Correct.
You would execute it for each of the releases, or when you want to push to a pre-production environment, for example.
Right.
So
Right.
that's yeah, more on an on-demand. This would be more of an on-demand SEO. But still, what you want to achieve is that in prior environments, like let's say you have a dev environment and then you have a test environment and then the
Mm.
pre-prod and the prod, just an
Yeah.
example,
Uh-huh.
then you still want to make sure that when work is the development work is done, the coding work is done, and it's being pushed to dev or to test and so on, then it's being tested, and many of the issues are found. Like first, of course, the unit tests need to be there. Uh, like hopefully, in most cases, that's the case, or well, not many times I see that it's not there, and the test
Right.
cases are not necessarily meaningful. But what you can do, and that's what I'm seeing the lack here, the component and the integration testing. So more in the middle is those UI tests that you have here, and you mentioned there are 500 test cases.
Oh,
So
it's
you can,
just an example. It's just an example for us to talk. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Take it.
let's go along with that example. So
Uh-huh.
there are 500 test cases. Now, what you can do as a tester is to work together with the developers, identify which of those test cases can be easily moved to a component level, and the data and communication between services, which are the ones that can be mocked out or stubbed out, and start building those stubbed services, start making mocks, and start moving those upper level test cases to component level. And this is the best part of all. You already have those test cases there. You just have to reuse them on lower level, build the box and the stubs to be able to leverage these test cases without using real data and real services. So what will happen? You don't have to wait all the way until you start your regression testing with real
Correct.
data. You can already have very quick and effective testing much earlier in the life cycle.
Uh,
Does this give you an idea on how you
Yeah. So I just need to compartmentalize those tests into the down levels that can be a faster feedback rather than waiting for the end-to-end to happen at the UI level. That there will be some UI that I can still keep, but I have to still group them up into compartments in the lower level that actually can be tested prior. We lost you. We lost you, Peter. No, cannot hear you yet.
So I want to say a quick thank you to everybody for joining us again today. We'll be posting this next week, like I said. Feel free to continue the chat. I'll leave the webinar up and running until it looks like activities died down. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their day. Thank you very much.